think we know the soundtrack of the 1970s. These tracks are burned into our collective memory, echoing across sold-out stadiums and playing on loop in our heads on long drives. We assume these monumental tracks were meticulously planned by geniuses in velvet-lined studios, predestined for heavy rotation. But here's what most people don't realize. The golden age of rock was built on accidents, corporate sabotage, and sheer desperation. From B-sides played entirely by mistake, by tired radio DJs, to desperate filler tracks, banged out in 20 minutes because a producer looked at his watch and demanded more material. The truth is, the biggest anthems of the decade almost never happened. In fact, the defining track of 1975, a song that still packs arenas today, was famously hurled into a dirty alleyway by its own creator. He was convinced the master tape was complete garbage and wanted it destroyed. Let's dig into the reels, spin the tape back, and look at 10 massive rock tracks everyone remembers from the 1970s. Because some songs become hits, others become something else entirely. 10. Black Betty by Ram Jam. There is a certain kind of hard rock staple that feels completely woven into the fabric of the late 70s. You hear it, and you instantly picture muscle cars, faded denim, and summer stadium parking lots. But this particular track wasn't actually written by the band that made it famous. It is an early 20th century African-American work song that was entirely repurposed for a new era. The band's producers took an old, haunting recording by the blues giant Leadbelly. They stripped it down to its bare acoustic bones. Then, they built a massive, relentless rock arrangement entirely around the original vocal cadence. If you listen closely to the percussion driving the beat, you can hear a highly distinctive swirling sound. That is a phaser effect applied directly to the hi-hat cymbals. It gave the track an undeniable momentum that radio stations couldn't resist, and it worked. It worked too well. The resulting song was so popular and so radically altered from its sacred folk roots that it sparked massive protests from civil rights groups. They felt the heavy rock treatment was highly disrespectful to the painful history of the original melody, commercializing a song born from genuine hardship. The controversy didn't stop it from climbing the charts, eventually landing at number 18 on the Billboard Hot 100. It proved that raw traditional roots could be electrified into commercial hits, but it also proved that when you borrow from the past, you carry the heavy weight of its history. 9. Barracuda by Heart.
Barracuda.
Some riffs are born from careful technical experimentation. Others are fueled by pure, unadulterated rage.
Smile like the sun, kisses for rain.
In the mid-70s, Heart was dealing with the crushing pressure of their rapidly expanding fame and a record label that simply didn't know how to handle them. Mushroom Records decided to run a sleazy promotional stunt in a trade magazine. The advertisement strongly implied that sisters Ann and Nancy Wilson were involved in a scandalous, incestuous relationship. It was a cheap tactic designed to move units at the expense of their dignity. Shortly after, following a concert, a promoter approached Ann and casually asked about her lover, explicitly referring to her own sister. Ann was absolutely furious.
We were all crying for free.
She retreated to her hotel room, locked the door, and poured her disgust onto paper in a matter of minutes. Meanwhile, the band had been listening to a heavy Driving Nazareth cover of a Joni Mitchell song. That rhythm embedded itself in their heads. When Ann brought her furious, biting lyrics to the studio, they married them to that famous galloping guitar riff.
Barracuda.
It stands as one of the fiercest musical responses to corporate music industry misogyny ever put to tape. Anger is a powerful muse. And sometimes, the absolute best way to silence a sleazy executive is to drown them out with volume. 8. American Woman by the Guess Who. There are tracks that take 6 grueling months to write in a studio, and then there are tracks that are willed into existence in front of a live audience. In 1970, a Canadian band was playing a routine gig in Ontario when things went slightly wrong. Guitarist Randy Bachman broke a string mid-set. The band had to stall for time. While he was quickly tuning his replacement string on stage, he stumbled onto a heavy descending riff. It sounded urgent. It sounded dangerous. The rest of the band heard the groove and instinctively jumped in to back him up. Lead singer Burton Cummings needed something to sing to fill the dead air, so he just started shouting the very first words that came into his head over the heavy beat. They were improvising a structured song in real time. The lyrics that poured out of Cummings were actually an anti-war protest aimed directly at the American political machine and the looming military draft. But here's the strange part. When the song hit the radio waves, audiences south of the border completely misinterpreted the message. American listeners embraced it as a patriotic, chest-thumping celebration of their women. That massive misunderstanding drove the track all the way to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It made them the first Canadian band in history to ever reach that peak on the American charts. A broken string and a misunderstood lyric. Sometimes, the right accident at the right time is all it takes to shift the culture. But not every cultural shift is born from a sudden happy accident on a public stage. 7. More Than a Feeling by Boston. When we think of the defining arena rock anthem of the 1970s, we usually picture million-dollar studios with pristine mixing boards and teams of hotshot producers. But this track was born in a cramped, humid basement in Watertown, Massachusetts, and its creator wasn't a rock star. He was a product engineer for the Polaroid Corporation. Tom Saltz spent over 5 years obsessively working on this demo after clocking out of his day job. He financed his own equipment, building custom effects units by hand to capture a very specific tone he heard in his head. He played almost every single instrument himself in that basement, layer by layer, year after year. The only missing piece was the voice, which came when he finally brought in a singer named Brad Delp to lay down those soaring vocal tracks. The technical achievement is staggering. Scholes meticulously blended a 12-string acoustic guitar with heavily layered electric tracks, running them through his own homemade devices. It created a thick, rich sonic wall that radio programmers had simply never heard before. It became known as the signature Boston sound. Climbing to #5 on the Billboard Hot 100, it proved that relentless, do-it-yourself perfectionism could not only match the major labels, but entirely outsell them. Because true vision doesn't require a limitless budget, it just requires a stubborn refusal to compromise. 6. Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits. Sometimes, inspiration strikes not in a moment of triumph, but in a moment of profound, quiet sadness. In 1978, London was a city swallowed by the aggressive noise of the punk movement. But on one particularly rainy night, a young musician named Mark Knopfler was simply looking for a place to stay dry. He ducked into a dreary pub in Deptford and found himself watching a deeply mediocre jazz band playing to a completely indifferent, mostly empty room. They finished their dismal set to zero applause. Yet, as they packed up their gear, the lead singer stepped up to the microphone and proudly announced to no one in particular that they were the Sultans of Swing. The tragic irony of that grand title in such a depressing setting struck Knopfler immediately. It was darkly funny, but it was also painfully human. He took that image home and turned it into a portrait of working-class musicians who play purely for the love of the sound, even when nobody is listening. When he recorded the track, His approach was completely out of step with the times. While everyone else was turning up the distortion and screaming into the microphone, Knopfler played a clean, intricate, finger-picked Fender Stratocaster. His tone was sharp, precise, and completely devoid of the heavy effects dominating radio at the time. It pushed all the way to number 4 on the Billboard chart, resurrecting a roots-oriented style of pub rock almost single-handedly. It is a quiet reminder that when the whole world is screaming, sometimes the most rebellious thing you can do is whisper. 5. Maggie May by Rod Stewart. The music industry is largely built on carefully calculated bets by powerful executives. But every now and then, the executives bet on the wrong horse, and fate has to step in to correct the record. In 1971, the record label was absolutely certain they had a smash hit on their hands with a polite, agreeable track called Reason to Believe. They pressed it as the A-side of a new single, completely ignoring the gritty, acoustic song they dumped onto the B-side just to fill out the vinyl. And it would have stayed a forgotten B-side forever if an influential radio DJ in Cleveland hadn't accidentally played the wrong side of the record on the air. The response was instantaneous. Listeners were instantly hooked by the continuous, rambling narrative flow. What's most interesting is that the song famously lacks a traditional chorus structure. It just tells a story, moving forward relentlessly until it culminates in a bright, dancing mandolin solo. That solo was performed by a session player named Ray Jackson, who was paid a flat fee of just £15 for his time and wasn't even given a credit on the album sleeve. That accidental radio spin sent the song soaring to number 1. It skyrocketed its singer from a respected band frontman into an inescapable, international solo superstar. It just goes to show that you can engineer a record as much as you want, but the listeners will always decide what matters. 4. Dream On by Aerosmith. There is a profound vulnerability in finding your true voice, and sometimes it takes years of hiding behind a mask before you finally let people hear what you actually sound like. When a young band from Boston went into the studio to record their debut album, their lead singer was crippled by insecurity. Steven Tyler was so terrified that his natural singing voice wasn't tough enough for rock and roll that he adopted a completely fake, exaggerated blues growl for almost the entire record. But there was one track where he dropped the act, one track where he let his real reaching voice ring out. He had been holding on to this song for a long time. He started writing the descending chord progression on a Steinway piano at a New Hampshire resort when he was just a teenager. When the band finally laid it down in 1973, they enhanced the mood by using a Mellotron keyboard to replicate a haunting cinematic string section in the background. But the record label had no faith in it. They offered virtually no promotional push, and the single died on the vine, stalling at number 59 on the charts. It took 3 years of relentless touring and growing word of mouth before the label finally agreed to re-release it. The second time around, it climbed to number 6, fundamentally establishing the blueprint for the modern power ballad. By blending a hard rock edge with sweeping classical instrumentation, it proved that heavy music could still break your heart. You can spend your whole life trying to sound like somebody else, but your greatest legacy is usually built on the one rare moment you decide to just be yourself. But the recording studio isn't always a place of careful, deliberate self-discovery. Sometimes, it is just a clock ticking down, demanding immediate results. 3. Paranoid by Black Sabbath. In 1970, a heavy, gloom-laden band from Birmingham, England had just finished recording their album, War Pigs. They were completely exhausted, but their producer looked at the track list, shook his head, and told them the record was simply too short. They needed exactly 3 more minutes of music to fill the vinyl. Guitarist Tony Iommi stayed behind in the live room and started playing a fast, chugging, palm-muted riff. The rest of the band literally walked down the street to grab a drink at the local pub. When they returned a short while later, bass player Geezer Butler quickly scribbled down some bleak lyrics about depression and paranoia on a piece of scrap paper. Lead singer Ozzy Osbourne grabbed the sheet and read the words straight from the page in a single take. The entire process took about 20 minutes. Yet, that rapid, aggressive picking technique directly paved the way for the thrash metal genre that would explode a decade later. It charted at number 4 in the UK, even though it barely cracked the top 65 in America at the time. The band thought nothing of it. To them, it was just necessary filler to get out of the studio. But here is the strange reality of the music business. You can spend a year agonizing over a complex symphony, only to watch an afterthought track accidentally create the tempo and aggression that defines heavy metal for the next 50 years. 2. Layla by Derek and the Dominoes. There is an assumption that the greatest love songs are instantly recognized as commercial triumphs. We think they hit the radio and the world immediately swoons. But one of the most famous rock ballads of the decade was a massive commercial failure upon its initial release. Eric Clapton wrote it as a tortured, desperate plea. He was helplessly in love with Pattie Boyd, a woman who happened to be married to his very close friend, George Harrison. You can hear that pure anguish in every single note, especially in the climax, where Duane Allman's soaring slide guitar parts were intentionally designed to mimic the shrill, crying calls of a bird. But the song carries a much darker history behind its famous dual guitar interplay. The celebrated second half of the track, the sprawling, melancholic piano coda, was credited to the band's drummer, Jim Gordon. For decades, that piano exit was praised as Gordon's finest contribution to music. Years later, however, it was revealed that Gordon allegedly lifted the melody directly from his ex-girlfriend, musician Rita Coolidge, effectively denying her royalties and recognition for her own work. The track eventually found its audience, hitting number 10 in 1972 after a re-release. But it remains a profoundly tragic work. It is a song born from a fractured love triangle, ending on a stolen melody, carrying shadows that are just as heavy as the music itself. 1. Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. Pressure does funny things to artists. It can forge diamonds, and it can also push a musician to the absolute edge of their sanity. By 1975, Bruce Springsteen was facing the very real threat of being dropped entirely by Columbia Records. He needed a hit, desperately, and he heard a very specific sweeping sound in his head. The problem was, capturing that sound on tape turned into a waking nightmare. It took the band 6 grueling months to record just one single 4.5-minute song. The studio bills were mounting exponentially. Springsteen was heavily relying on the wall of sound production technique. He was relentlessly layering multiple pianos, guitars, glockenspiels, and synthesizers, trying to build one massive sonic wave. Take a moment to think about that level of obsession. Hundreds of hours, endless takes. When the final mix was finally finished and pressed onto a master acetate, Springsteen listened to it, and he hated it. His perfectionism completely took over. He was so convinced that he had ruined the song and his career with it that he took the physical record and threw it directly into a dirty alleyway. He wanted to scrap the entire project. His manager actually had to physically restrain him to stop him from destroying the tapes. The track eventually reached number 23 on the Billboard Hot 100. More importantly, it secured his legacy as the enduring voice of working-class America, painting a cinematic portrait of escaping a dying town. It stands as the ultimate testament to the painful birth of great art. Sometimes, a beautiful thing only survives because someone stops you from tearing it apart. We often look back at the 1970s and assume these monumental rock tracks were predestined for greatness. We see the platinum records and the stadium tours, and it all feels like it was simply meant to be. But the truth is, the line between a forgotten demo and a generational touchstone is incredibly thin. History is rarely a straight line. Often, the soundtrack of our lives was decided by a frustrated vocal take, a stolen piano riff, or a DJ flipping a vinyl record over by pure chance. Some songs just become hits, but others define an entire moment in time, capturing lightning in a bottle against all odds, and echoing long after the tape stops rolling.